again. I'm Phyllis Stork of Stork Custom Mouthpieces. Today, we continue our series on how the mouthpiece works with a discussion of mouthpiece cups, what they are, what they do, and as always, how to get them to work for you. A cup is defined as a small, open, bowl-shaped container for holding liquids. I define the cup as the tone center of a mouthpiece. Want more sound? Look to the cup. More cup equals more sound. So this should be simple, right? Just play the biggest, deepest cup you can and you'll be all set. Yeah, not really. Let's look deeper. Cups break down into two major elements, cup depth and cup shape. Basically, there are two major cup shapes, C-shaped cups and V-shaped cups. C-shaped cups look like the letter C dropped on its side. V-shaped cups look like the letter V. But neither cup depth nor cup shape alone addresses the bigger issue at play. Both really boil down to a more significant concept, cup volume. If a cup is defined as a container for holding liquids, our cups are to be thought of in the same way, except that instead of holding liquids, they hold air. How much a cup can hold is said to be its volume. The deeper the cup, the greater its volume. A shallow cup can hold less than a deep cup and therefore has less volume to it. When we think in terms of how much volume a cup holds, we can also start to consider how much pressure would be required to move its contents and create velocity. The greater the volume of the cup, the more pressure required. What this means to you as a brass player is that the deeper your cup, the greater the pressure you will need to power it. In other words, the harder you will have to blow to create velocity. When we consider cup shape in these terms, we can begin to see why each major cup shape has its own intrinsic acoustic properties. If you compare both types straight across the board, you can see that the V-shaped cup at the same depth will have less overall volume to it. Less volume means that it will be easier to move the air to velocity. Not only is there less volume in a V-shaped cup of the same depth, but the very nature of the V-shape creates a more efficient flow pattern, just like a funnel does with liquids, which helps to move the air faster. Okay, check this out. V-shaped cup, C-shaped cup. Same hole size. Same amount of liquid. And you can see that the V-shaped cup moves the water faster. So, why is velocity so important? Because velocity equals efficiency. When we talk about efficiency in a mouthpiece, we think of things like ease of range, precise intonation, and quick, responsive attacks. An efficient mouthpiece is also one that slots quickly, meaning that the piece moves from one pitch to another, especially over large jumps, quickly and on point. No sounds of manipulation in between the notes. No wobbles in pitch when it gets there, and no lag time. Just a quick pop from one note to the next. The result? Clean, pure sound and accurate intonation. Yeah, just like that. Okay, so this sounds great. Just play a really shallow cup and you'll be all set. Yeah, again, not really. Remember, more cup equals more sound. While a shallow cup is great for range and efficiency, it can lack the depth and breadth of sound needed in many musical settings. So how do we know what's right? How shallow is too shallow? How deep is too deep? How do we qualify these dimensions and wind up with the right balance for a given player? Is sound the only criteria we should be using? As always, our primary consideration is the individual player and their personal physiology. For those with fleshy lips, more of the cup will be displaced by the intrusion of the lips. Those who have fleshy lips learn this empirically. If they play something too shallow, their lips will touch on the inside of the cup and cease to vibrate. No vibration, no sound. So if you have very fleshy lips, a shallow cup is not an option. It follows that the inverse will also be true. Players with thin lips can play a very shallow cup with no problem. So it's important to keep in mind that cup depth is a relative principle. The depth of the cup for a fleshy lip player, whose lips naturally take up a good deal of the cup, would be fully the equivalent of a 50-gallon drum to the thin lip player, whose lips barely crack the plane. So the thin lip player is always in danger of playing something too deep. How does one know when the mouthpiece is too deep for them? The answer is easy: when you start to lose efficiency. It can be best to think of cup volume like lifting weights. A shallow cup is like lifting a 5-pound weight, while a deep cup can be more like lifting a 50-pound weight. Creating velocity in a greater area of volume takes a lot more work. Playing a cup with too much volume to it will result in negative consequences like poor range, poor endurance, poor response, and poor intonation. In other words, the opposite of efficiency. Many players struggle with these issues without even realizing the root cause. Most players will blame themselves before considering their equipment choices. It is certainly true that not all problems can be solved through equipment, but it is also true, as my mentor and teacher William Vacchiano used to say, that the mouthpiece forms the player. If you are using equipment that is not suitable for your physiology, your body will create adaptations to make things work. The worse the fit, the more potentially destructive the adaptation your body will naturally make in order to get the flawed setup to sort of work. So how do we get to the sound we want and or need and still have efficiency? By carefully manipulating cup volume along with strategic use of cup shape. If you're a fleshy lip player who needs a lot of depth along with a large inner diameter at the top of the cup to allow your lips to vibrate freely, you may want to compensate by using a V-shaped cup to help minimize what would already be a large amount of volume. This will help an overly dark and tubby sound while improving efficiency. If you're playing on a shallow piece for maximum range, but would like, or need, to take a bit of the edge off the sound, you can add a bit of bowl to the cup. This will slow the air a tad and soften the sound. If you add some bowl and the range drops off, you immediately know where your boundaries are. You will have to look somewhere else to find a way to offset the extra volume in the cup by tightening another aspect of the mouthpiece in order to put the overall volume back to where it needs to be. Knowing where to add or take away volume is a science and can be applied with almost surgical precision. So, the big question in creating this balance for a player comes down to how much can you afford to give in order to get? The more the player can give in terms of how much air pressure they are capable of exerting, the more flexibility they can have in choosing what kind of sound they would like to produce. If you have a very strong upper register and everything clicks all the time for you, you can afford to slow the air and grab some extra warmth and depth of sound. As I always say to players, dark is easy to do. Darkness comes from simply slowing down the air. Anytime you add to the overall volume of a mouthpiece, you are moving towards slowing the air. And while it is true that some players can continue to speed the air even in large amounts of internal volume, everyone has a tipping point where the air will no longer speed, but will start to slow down, drifting towards inefficiency and all the negatives that go with it. So, sound cannot be the sole criteria. Sound must be qualified by the hallmarks of efficiency, intonation, response, and range. So, if you're playing on a really deep cup with a large bore and backbore, but can't get through a performance, you've gone too big. If you have a warm, dark piccolo sound, but can't play the piece you've been hired for, you've gone too big. If you can't get up to the required speed in a multiple tonguing passage, think something like Scheherazade, you've gone too big. And if you fall off the pitch during sustained attacks in the upper register, say something like the opening of Tchaikovsky 4, you've gone too big. 10% more darkness to the sound will not make up for all these other flaws in your playing. On the other hand, if your sound is too bright for a given orchestra ensemble, you need to go larger. If your lips are touching on the inside of the cup, you need to go larger. If your pitch hangs flat in the upper register, you need to go larger. If you feel like you are blowing your brains out and still can't be heard, you need to go larger. But there are more ways to go larger than just manipulating the cup. In our next video, we will be talking about the bore and back bore of a mouthpiece and how they are used to create balance in the overall volume and hence resistance of a mouthpiece. So, until next time. If you'd like more information about who we are and what we do, you can find us on the web at storkcustom.com. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any of these discussions, just hit the red subscribe button below. See you soon.